Welcome. I am Daisy, your hostess. In this video, we're going through the book titled Autosuggestion, what it is, and how to use it for health, happiness, and success by Herbert A. Parkyn. Have you heard that saying? It says, if you think you can't or you think you can, you're right. Now, do you believe that to be true? Have there been times where you've said, I can't, and then it's like there was a wall, you just really couldn't? And then when you say, I can, all of a sudden you have all the oomph that you need to get it done. Isn't that interesting? Well, this book may be a little bit antiquarian, but the point is that there's this deep truth about that, about those subliminals, about those autosuggestions. And if you're not programming yourself, guess what? The habits that you create are programming you, or what I call this, the corporate world, the advertising, those other businesses that want a bit of you are programming you subliminally. And all of a sudden you're into the fad, you're buying this, you're doing that, and then you ask yourself, do I really want this? And you don't even know why, but it's ingrained in there somewhere. So I believe that there's going to be a lot of still good things that we're going to catch in the next few chapters. He's going to cover success. He's going to cover health. And I have to tell you, from my own, I would call it testimonial, when I was a police officer, I had an issue in the academy with the strength in my hand, because back when I was when I was becoming a police officer, they were still using revolvers, and there's a lot of strength you need to really move that hammer. You would think only one time, but the thing is that you have to qualify, you have to shoot the gun many times, and that hammer all of a sudden feels like 50 pounds on your little finger as you're trying to pull that hammer back. And I had to convince myself that I could do this. And I had the support of my police trainer in the academy that said, you can do it, and gave me some techniques that I could try. And I went through it, and it was tough, but I did. I put my mind to it. And then also when I had an illness, they said that this was something that really was cancerous, and that I would need to remove and have an operation and surgery. And I just said, you know what? I am well, and I'm going to get through this. And the power of suggestion can actually help you get better. I'm not saying that you shouldn't see a doctor. I'm just saying, for me, during certain circumstances, it really worked. And I have my whole family as a testimony regarding that situation. It didn't happen overnight. The healing didn't happen overnight. It took a few years, but it did happen, and it has not recurred. So I do believe in what we tell ourselves really affects not only our brain, I think it affects our whole chemistry. And in that sense, it realigns a lot of things to our favor. So if you want to get some tips on this, tune into these next chapters and go grab the previous ones as I go ahead and turn the page to the next chapter. Chapter 10. Autosuggestion and Success. Over a year ago, I received a letter from a correspondent asking me what he should do to make a success of himself in business. He said that he had never made a success of anything, had managed to eke out a bare existence, but felt he lacked the force or something that would enable him to be successful. That many good opportunities had opened for him, but he had failed to grasp them properly or had been afraid to venture. That his continual poor luck had made him timid, ambitionless, and melancholic. That his health was poor as a consequence of the constant worry his failures had brought to him, etc. So this man thought, and so he was. But he is succeeding now. I wrote to him to come to me personally for treatment. He came, and inside of 1 month, this man's mind was filled with strong, determined, forceful, confident, aggressive thoughts, and his health improved from the first. He left me believing he could make a success of anything to which he applied himself, and, as I said before, he has succeeded beyond his highest expectations. I made him change his habit of thinking by the intelligent use of autosuggestion. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. To suit our present purpose, this quotation might read, a man is what his autosuggestions make him. And I should like to add, change a man's autosuggestions and you change the man. When this patient came to me, I explained the meaning of the term autosuggestion and how by voluntary autosuggestion, the involuntary mind can be influenced to habitually think the thoughts a person desires it to think. Then I taught him how to build up his health by proper thinking and the judicious use of the life essentials. See Chapter 2. In a few days, his health improved greatly, and I made use of the improvement in health as a basis for his autosuggestions. The autosuggestions employed, with slight variations, will be found in the preceding chapter. My patient repeated to himself autosuggestions similar to these hundreds of times every day, till his mind was filled with them and his actions were governed accordingly. In fact, he told himself these stories so often that in the end he believed them to be true, and his actions and subsequent success proved that they were true. Now, this is not an exceptional case. I have seen the same results follow in scores of cases under the same line of autosuggestive treatment. Examine the autosuggestions, and you will see they are all strong, encouraging assertions. Some reader may say the suggestions outlined are too boastful, but permit me to say to any objecting reader who may not have made a success in life, that perhaps a little of this kind of boasting on the side, even to your intimates, will not injure your prospects in the least, and it may enable you to amount to something in the end. Assumption is half the battle of life. Stick to it and get there, the other half. And if a timid non-entity will use these autosuggestions with the assumption that they are true and stick to them faithfully, he will get there in spite of his old self or anyone else. I care not in what walk or station in life he may find himself. It is very becoming in a man who has made a success in life to be modest about his success, but self-depreciation never made a success of anyone. Point to any successful man in the country, and you will be pointing to a man who made a success because he had determination and believed in himself and his powers. But it is not sufficient for a man to make the autosuggestions for success and then wait for success to come to him. No, he must go over the autosuggestions till they are in his mind all the time. He must think of the meaning of the autosuggestions as he repeats them till he can feel their influence, and then he must go out and hustle. He must do the best he can at everything he finds to do, backed up by the thought that he is in line for promotion in some way or other, or that his present work is merely a stepping stone to his ultimate success. A man who knows that he is bound to be a success is always on the alert to grasp opportunities, whereas the opportunities invariably pass unnoticed by the ambitionless man who has resigned himself to the buffetings of fate, believing that success has nothing in common with him. I have had the pleasure of reading Prentice Mulford's The Drawing Power of the Mind. I am afraid poor Prentice put the cart before the horse in selecting the title for his booklet and in the theories advanced in it, for the mind never drew anything. Your attention riveted upon an object will take you to it, or will so influence your unconscious thoughts and unconscious actions that, although it appears to be drawn to you, you have actually gone after it. You may dislike a person, but for reasons politic you determine not to show your dislike. You may even go out of your way in an endeavor to make yourself agreeable to the object of your dislike. Still, in some way or other, a coldness will spring up between you, and the dislike becomes common and may end in an open rupture without either person being able to explain how the dislike was uncovered. The explanation is simple. Thought takes form in action, and the dislike will so influence your actions that you will betray yourself by a look or a nudge or some other unconscious slight. The action may be wholly involuntary or unconscious on your part, and it may be just unconsciously noticed on the part of the other person, but his involuntary mind takes cognizance of the action. The seed of discord is sown in his mind also, and the damage is done. Similarly, you may cherish a strong desire to go somewhere, to do something, or to possess something. You may not deem your desire reasonable nor within the realm of possibility at the time, but your actions, conversations, and decisions will be influenced by this desire in various ways. Although it may take years for you to satisfy your desire, still that desire is usually gratified by the opening up of ways and means. And this opening up, although it may appear accidental, is, 9 times out of 10, the direct result of actions unconsciously performed through the promptings of your desire. Consequently, in assuming that you are bound to be a success, that you are strong, determined, fearless, that you are a success, etc., your thoughts influence your actions, which in turn pave the way to success, and sooner or later you find yourself surprisingly confronted with your own brilliant achievements. I shall conclude this chapter by quoting out of Dorothy Dick's fable in slang, which appeared recently in the Chicago Examiner. While it may not be couched in language that would be chosen by a college professor, still it is undoubtedly very clever, very true, and decidedly apropos. It is Dorothy's way of giving an illustration of the results that can be brought about by the use of autosuggestion. The title, Successful Autosuggestions for Success, would fit it well, but I'll let her tell it herself. Fable of the Modest Okapi by Dorothy Dix, 1903. Once upon a time there was a poor but honest Okapi who found it necessary to cinch some job whereby he might earn his beer and pretzels. Now, the Okapi was an industrious and intelligent young creature, but unfortunately he was possessed of the vice of modesty, and instead of putting up a chesty front and giving himself the glad hand, he went about bearing his own stock. It is true, he would say to those to whom he applied for work, that I do not understand your craft, nor can I recommend myself very highly, for I am not one of the nifty boys who are always Johnny on the spot. Neither am I one of the cute ones who can pick them right going and coming, but I am a cheapskate who would be willing to work for his board and clothes, and in time, with patience and forbearance, I might catch on. Nixarina, not us, replied the bulls he was trying to hold up, for we are not running a kindergarten, and when we invest our stuff in an employee, we do not buy dead ones. It chanced that Okapi was also in love, and here, too, his modesty queered the game, for, approaching his divinity, he thus addressed her. Beauteous one, be mine, he cried. Alas, I know that I am not worthy of you, for I have not lived a life that has caused me to be held up as an example to youth to follow, nor have I been able to acquire enough of the needful to keep me off the cinder path, while, as you see, nature framed me up in a way that makes me a bum-looker. Still my heart is in the right place, and it is yours for keeps. Forget it, cried the little tigress, giving him the ice. For when I start out to look for a husband, I am not going to take a leftover remnant of the job lot counter. At these words the Okapi was very sad, and sitting down by the roadside, he began to bemoan his cruel fate with many weeps. This attracted the attention of a compassionate owl, who happened to pass that way and who stopped and inquired the cause of the Okapi's sorrow. Woe is me, cried the Okapi, for I perceive that fate has given me the double cross, and it's me to take a cute little dose of rough and rats and drill away from a world where modest merit is not appreciated. What is your trouble? Inquired the owl. No one will back me for the race of life, replied the Okapi. Although I entered myself as 100-to-1 shot, and when I humbly kowtowed at the tigress' feet, all that I got was a kick in the neck. This is not the first time, quoth the owl with great sagacity, that I have been called upon to observe that modesty is generally a frost, and that if we want anybody to blow our horns, we must do it ourselves. Your mistake has been in touting yourself as a selling plater instead of a hot favorite. Copper that. Go back and spread all the news around that you are a foreplay baby and a winner, and that everything that goes down on you is educated money. Thus adjured the Okapi rigged himself up in a chappy clothes and butted into a business office with his Panama on the side of his head and 4 yards of watch chain across his breast. "Say you," he said, addressing the proprietor, "why don't you wake up and get a move on? Whenever you want somebody to teach you how to tear things off and make your rivals look like 30 cents, I'm the goods. But I'm a high-priced prima donna, and there's no use in shaking the long green at me unless you're ready to put up for an expert." "Ha!" cried the proprietor. "This is the genuine thing, and we will make haste to engage his services before someone steals him away from us. For we opine that he would not have the nerve to ask so much unless he knew his real value." Thereupon they engaged the Okapi at a large and juicy salary, and as he was in reality a clever and worthy creature, he soon made good. Seeing that he had bluffed out on one hand, the Okapi encored the performance and again approached the tigress and renewed his suit. But instead of groveling at her tootsie-wootsies, he looked down upon her from a pedestal. "I feel," he said, "that it is the sacred duty of a strong and noble masculine creature to marry and protect some female. And while of course I do not expect any mere female creature to be able to really appreciate me or come up to my ideal, I apprehend that you will come as near filling the bill as anyone. So I have decided to confer the honor upon you of lockstepping to the altar with me." "How good and kind you are," cried the tigress, "and how grateful I am to have won the affection of such a superior being." "This," said the Okapi to himself, "is where I cut out modesty forever, for I perceive that the world takes us at our own valuation, and that it is up to us to always mark the price tag up high." Moral: this fable teaches us that we should always speak well of ourselves, or nobody else will. End of chapter. Chapter 11. Autosuggestion and breathing exercises. Would it not seem ridiculous if we found it necessary to instruct our horses or dogs how to breathe? These animals live almost altogether out of doors, take plenty of exercise, and in consequence breathe as nature intended them to breathe. But man, poor man, will live and work in stuffy offices and homes without exercise till he runs down physically through lack of fresh air, actually starving for air. And yet, when he realizes that he must take more fresh air into his lungs in order to regain his health, he may wait weeks or months before making a start in order that he may be certain to begin with some system of breathing that is recognized as being correct. I have received hundreds of letters asking me what system of breathing I advise my patients to take, and from these I have selected the following typical letter. Quote, "I read with a great deal of interest and profit your article, How to Keep Healthy in Winter, which appeared in a recent number of Suggestion. Now, I know a person should drink about 2 quarts of water per day and should eat a fair amount of wholesome food. These are 2 of the life essentials, but the third essential, air, has to be obtained by exercise in breathing. I have paid attention to my liquids and food, but I am waiting for some instructions in the proper method of breathing. There are so many systems of breathing advocated that I have never known which to choose, and I turn to you for advice. There must be a right way and a wrong way to breathe, and before taking up regular breathing exercises, I want to know the best method to pursue. I might add that I have been a chronic sufferer for years, but since reading Suggestion, I have been looking after the life essentials and have improved wonderfully since eating and drinking properly, but I have hesitated to take breathing exercises until, as I said before, I knew the proper method to use." End quote. This letter is on a par with another I received from a man who said he was saving up to buy a water distilling apparatus before he would increase his liquids to the allotted 2 quarts per diem. Both these men remind me of the man who was burned to death because he hesitated too long for fear he would take cold if he left his burning house in his nightgown. If you discover today that you have been drinking only a quart of fluids a day when you require 2 quarts, don't wait to get a distilling apparatus, but start in at once to increase your fluids. Drink boiled water if it is handy, and if there's no boiled water at hand and your supply of drinking water is considered bad, drink the best bad water you can get. But drink the water first and send for your still afterward. You will make more trouble in your physical system by denying yourself water because it is said to be bad, than by drinking all your system requires, even if the water be bad. And so it is with breathing. If you find you have not been getting sufficient air into your lungs, get outdoors and breathe air. Or if you are shut up in an office in which the air is not good, get fresh air into the room if you can. And if you cannot improve the air, then breathe in more of the bad air and take steps afterward to change the system of ventilation. And when you get out of doors, endeavor to make up for the bad air you were forced to breathe while indoors. Breathe. Breathe deeply, anyhow, in any way you know, and hunt up your systems of breathing later if you are determined to have a system for taking every breath. Systems of breathing. I'm not ridiculing the various systems of breathing that are taught. I believe thoroughly in them all, no matter how different they may be. And I believe one system is as good as another. Any system will do if the exercises are taken faithfully with a definite purpose in mind. All these systems of breathing perform a double purpose. First, the person practicing them faithfully certainly gets more air into his lungs than if he took no exercises at all. Second, every time a breathing exercise is taken, it is taken for a purpose, and the purpose kept in mind tends to materialize, for thought takes form in action. In other words, consciously or unconsciously, the autosuggestions which invariably accompany the exercises assist in bringing about the desired results. A person who is strong and healthy usually breathes deeply and gets all the air he requires without conscious effort. He needs no system of breathing, but a person who is run down physically seldom breathes deeply, for the impulses to the organs of respiration become feeble in proportion to the decline in health. Consequently, if a person's health is below par, it is important that his attention be called to the necessity for helping himself to as much air as he should take if in perfect health. It is not necessary that a patient of this kind shall breathe according to any particular system. All he need do is to breathe until he is conscious of having taken more air into his lungs than usual. And the beneficial effects will follow if he breathes deeply for a few minutes 8 or 10 times a day. But merely telling a man he must breathe more air is not sufficient to secure the desired results in the average person. He may think of it now and again, for a day or two, and then forget to make further efforts to breathe deeply. And here is where the value of employing some system of breathing comes in. For the mere act of breathing in an unusual manner, as required by the exercises, calls to mind the necessity for deep breathing many times during the day, and the exercises taken accordingly require an effort of the will in their accomplishment, and in this way strengthen the autosuggestions. The best and proper way to breathe is abdominal breathing. Men as a rule, especially in health, breathe from the abdomen, but women, from wearing corsets and hanging heavy clothing around their waist, breathe usually from the chest. Here is the way to breathe from the abdomen. Take a full, long, deep breath, so deep that not only is the chest raised, but you are also conscious that the abdomen has been distended. Now hold the chest up and keep it distended, and let the breath out gradually by drawing the abdomen in and up. When the air is forced out of the lungs by contracting the abdomen and drawing it up, take in another breath till the abdomen is again distended, and continue breathing this way, all the time holding the chest up so that there's very little motion in it. Advantages of abdominal breathing. Abdominal breathing has a double effect. It enables one to fill his lungs to their greatest capacity, and the movement of the abdomen acts as a massage to the intestines and stomach. I have seen constipation of 20 years standing overcome in a few days by abdominal breathing. The patient was in good health otherwise, looked after the life essentials well, but breathed entirely from the chest, not a movement of the abdomen being discernible. The change to abdominal breathing worked like a charm. Abdominal breathing is the one breathing exercise I require all patients to use. They may practice other exercises recommended by others if they desire, or can make up exercises for themselves, but I keep them practicing the abdominal breathing until it has become a habit. It can be practiced either sitting or standing or lying down, but should be practiced consciously for several minutes at a time, 8 or 10 times a day, until it has become a habit. A good way to practice this method of breathing is while walking. Hold yourself erect, fill the lungs, then let out the breath while taking 5 or 6 steps and take it in during the next 5 or 6 steps. Brisk walking increases the value of this exercise, and the steps with each inhalation or each exhalation can be increased to 7 or 8. Endeavor to breathe through the nostrils while taking this exercise. A person whose health is below par should pay careful attention to the life essentials, and in helping himself to air, he's endeavoring to accomplish a purpose. He uses autosuggestion with every breath taken through design, and many of the remarkable results that have followed the practice of some system of breathing and exercising have been due to autosuggestion rather than to the special system employed. This being the case, I would recommend everyone who practices deep breathing to formulate his autosuggestions and go over them in his mind every time he goes through the exercises, for in this way he can heighten their effect. So much can be accomplished through the intelligent use of autosuggestion, not only in improving the physical health, but in bringing about desirable mental conditions and influencing our daily lives. That is a good plan to study the autosuggestions that will benefit us and employ them faithfully. But it is difficult sometimes to remember to use the autosuggestions regularly. For this reason, it is always desirable to have some practical thing to enable us to recall them, and breathing exercises will do this admirably. In fact, in my practice, I frequently prescribe deep breathing exercises, even for patients who do not require them. For I know that every time the exercises are practiced, the autosuggestions I desire my patient to repeat are recalled to his mind. In this way, I have seen severe mental troubles overcome. Breathing and autosuggestion. Not long ago, I saw an advertisement which said that worry and fear could be overcome in a short time. The purchaser was given directions for abdominal breathing and told to practice it often. Many wonderful results followed the practice of this secret, but the results were produced not so much by the breathing as by the autosuggestions which necessarily accompanied the exercise. I would say, therefore, to anyone who may be practicing breathing exercises, or to anyone who expects to start deep breathing, go ahead with your exercises. Breathe in any way that will enable you to get plenty of air into your lungs, giving the preference to abdominal breathing, but take the exercises frequently every day. And remember to employ autosuggestions while you exercise, for you would not be taking the exercises unless you expected to accomplish something through them. And the mind is such an important factor in bringing about the results you desire, that you should direct your thoughts systematically and intelligently. For instance, if you're breathing to improve your general health, use autosuggestions like the following. This air is one of the life essentials. I am now breathing deeply, and it feels so good to get this fresh air into my lungs. I know I shall feel better for it. This fresh air will have a beneficial effect on my whole system. It will make me sleep soundly, help me to digest my food and improve the quality of my blood. And the massage resulting from the abdominal breathing will make my bowels move regularly every morning. This deep breathing is stimulating me mentally and physically. I feel stronger already. My mind seems clearer. I feel bright and happy and cheerful. I know I shall be made perfectly well again. Every deep breath stimulates the heart's action and in this way assures better nutrition to every cell in the body. I enjoy these breathing exercises and will remember to take them frequently. Note, go over these or similar autosuggestions earnestly, not automatically, and vary them to suit the individual requirements, remembering that thought takes form in action. End of chapter. Chapter 12. Autosuggestion, its influence on health in the winter. If it were not for the great increase in sickness during the winter months, thousands of physicians now practicing in the United States would be forced to seek ways of making a living other than prescribing or dispensing medicines for the suffering sick. A large percentage of the medical profession is comparatively idle during the summer months. But by collecting his fees from patients who have run up accounts with him during the winter months, the physician is able to tide over the slack season. Now, the cause for this phenomenon is not difficult to find, for it can be traced very directly, first, to the great difference between the methods of partaking of the life essentials in winter and in summer, and second, to the depressed mental attitude so many people allow themselves to fall into at the approach of winter, and their fearful anticipation of the dangers they think it necessarily brings. The fact is that health is quite as easily maintained, generally speaking, in winter as in any other season, if one only observes the necessary conditions. As already implied, these conditions, and they are all very simple, are both physical, that is to say, material and mental. I shall speak first of the material conditions, or agencies, then of the right mental attitude and how it may be strengthened by autosuggestion. Many will say that the clothing worn is an essential consideration, but I do not intend to enter here into a discussion of the clothing question. It has been discussed over and over again by persons looked upon as eminent authorities. No two of them can agree. Still, the fact remains that there are healthy people who wear flannel underclothing and healthy people who wear cotton underclothing. Healthy people who wear heavy clothing and healthy people who wear light clothing. And one man I know wears neither underclothing nor an overcoat during the winter. Still, I have met this man on the street in a northern state when the thermometer was registering 30 degrees below zero, and he boasts that he has never been sick for a day in his life. I know men who wear heavy clothing in the winter who are always sick, men who wear light clothing who are sick. In fact, you will find sick men in flannel underclothing, sick men in cotton underclothing, and sick men who wear no underclothing at all. Consequently, it stands to reason that health cannot depend greatly on the clothing worn, and no set of rules can apply to all. If a man has good health when winter sets in and looks after the life essentials properly, he can accustom himself to wear any kind of clothing and maintain his health during the winter months, whether his clothing be red, white, blue, or black, light or heavy, cotton or flannel. Bathing. How to bathe during the winter is another subject on which there is an endless variety of opinions. But there are healthy men who bathe every morning in cold water, healthy men who bathe daily in warm or tepid water, healthy men who bathe in cold or hot water once or twice a week, or perhaps only once or twice a month. And there are healthy men who never bathe during the whole winter. Again, we can find sick men who bathe daily or weekly or monthly, and sick men who never bathe during the winter. So that health cannot depend entirely upon style of bath one takes, nor upon how often the bath is taken. Bathing in the winter, like the clothes one wears, can be regulated by the healthy man to suit his inclinations, his convenience, and his views on bathing for health or cleanliness without impairing his health. If he takes properly all the life essentials day in and day out. Personally, I favor frequent bathing. Not that I believe it has the great influence over health that many would have us believe, but on account of a belief in cleanliness, and I desire for it, for pure cleanliness' sake. This desire, however, is probably the result of early training. For many a man who has not received that training may have just as good health as I claim to have and never bathe once during the winter. Again, it is largely a matter of what one becomes accustomed to. On the Motorongo plantation in Mexico, one gang of peons was ordered to chop down the trees along the Motorongo River, but they would not agree to carry out the work if it was necessary for them to so much as put their feet in the water. I was surprised at this. For a few days before I had seen another gang of peons sawing a felled tree into sections while standing in water up to their waists. In fact, I secured a photograph of the group which showed that the cross-cut saws with which they were working were actually submerged. On making inquiry, I found that these two gangs of workmen belonged to two different tribes of Indians. One gang came from a section of the country where there was an abundance of water, and all were expert swimmers and enjoyed the daily bath. The other gang came from a section of the country where water is very scarce and seldom used except for drinking purposes, their women having to walk long distances to do the family washing. These Indians, I discovered, never voluntarily wash their bodies the whole year round, and the only bath they ever get is from the soaking they receive occasionally while working in the rain. And yet every man in both these gangs appears to have excellent health, and all certainly look strong and robust. But they all get plenty of fresh air, drink freely of water, and eat plenty of their native foods and fruits. In other words, they all partake freely of the life essentials. It is possible to have health in winter in any kind of clothing, with any kind of bathing, or in any style of house, whether well heated or very cold, for healthy persons are found living under all these extreme conditions. But let a person living under any of these conditions neglect the life essentials for a while, and a decline in his health will follow at once. And if the neglect be continued, he is open to the inroads of any disease which he may come into contact. Neglected life essentials. The two life essentials generally neglected in the winter season are air and water. During the summer season, the average man spends more hours in the open air. He may be shut up in a poorly ventilated office during business hours, but he walks to business or rides an open streetcar in the morning. His lunch hour is generally spent in the open air. He walks or rides home at 6 p.m., and his evenings till 10 p.m. are generally spent out of doors. Even his office is better ventilated in the summer, for all windows are thrown open. There are half holidays and whole holidays and Sundays, all of which are spent in the open air in the summer, while children live almost entirely in the open air during the warm weather. But during the winter months, a man usually rides in closed, crowded streetcars, in which the air is very poor, and he generally spends his whole day in a close, stuffy atmosphere in an office in which the windows are seldom opened. He hurries home in a crowded car to spend his evening indoors. The children also seldom get as much fresh air in winter as in summer. This failure to get sufficient fresh air during the winter is in itself an important factor in the development and spreading of disease. Then again, the average person drinks less water during the winter. In summer, a healthy man perspires freely and exercises more. There are soda water fountains on every corner in our cities. Everything tends to produce and suggest thirst during the summer months, and men, women, and children drink more freely than in winter. Consequently, in summer, as a rule, people breathe plenty of fresh air and drink plenty of liquids. And when a person breathes properly and drinks properly, his elimination is good. All the secretions of his body are plentifully supplied, and he will digest and assimilate his food properly unless he eats an abnormal quantity. Even persons who habitually eat too much feel better during the warm weather, as the fresh air and water they get enable them to digest, assimilate, and eliminate better. Of course, there are many who become sick during the summer months from drinking too much cold liquid, for drinking, like anything else, can be overdone, whether the liquids drunk be hot or cold. But as I have already said, the average amount of sickness during the winter months is greatly in excess of the average amount of sickness in summer, and the difference is directly attributable to other causes I have pointed out. Mark the great increase in sickness during the holiday season. It is 3 months since the really warm weather, and unconsciously the amount of water drunk daily in summer has been reduced. In consequence, the secretions of the body have grown markedly less, and digestion, assimilation, and elimination are not so good. Then comes Christmas, the holiday week, and New Year's, with all the good things on the table, everything gotten up to tempt the palate. And how we tuck in and eat as if we never tasted food before, men, women, and children, particularly the children, and especially the grown-ups. At that time, the stomach is overloaded day after day. The diminished quantity of gastric juice is unable to perform such heroic work. The other digestive organs are as badly off, and in short, the organs of digestion and assimilation balk in their work. But not before the whole circulation is overloaded with the excess of waste products that the overworked organs of elimination have failed to carry away. The result is inevitable. The percentage of sick persons and the percentage of deaths go up with leaps and bounds, and our physicians get busy. Why liquids are needed. In order to have good health during the winter, it is necessary to breathe as much fresh air and drink as much liquid daily as during the summer months. Of course, many drink too much during the summer, but the average quantity required by the average adult is 2 quarts, about 8 to 10 glassfuls every 24 hours, and children should drink in proportion to their size and age. A simple rule for children is to drink 1 glassful of liquid for every 10 pounds they weigh until they tip the scales at 70 pounds, and have a glass for every 15 pounds in excess of this weight. It is difficult to make the average man believe he requires as much water in winter as in summer, for he will tell you that since he perspires freely in summer, he has to drink more to make up for the liquids lost through the skin, while in winter his skin is comparatively inactive. He forgets that in warm weather, his skin is doing nearly all the work of elimination that his kidneys have to do in the winter. I shall say but little about the food to be taken during the winter. Bread, butter, beefsteak, potatoes, eggs, and milk contain all the food essentials required to make strength and sustain health. To these can be added other meats, vegetables, fruits, cereals, etc. But everything should be properly prepared, taken in moderation, and thoroughly masticated. To people who would keep their health in winter, I would say, bathe yourselves and clothe yourselves as suits best your convenience and comfort, keeping an eye to cleanliness for the sake of cleanliness. Eat moderately 3 times a day of good, wholesome, well-cooked foods. Breathe plenty of fresh air, and drink 2 quarts of liquids per day. The 2 quarts, by the way, may be made up of tea, coffee, milk, or water. Avoid drinking too much tea or coffee. A little of either or both will not hurt you if you are in good health, but keep up the daily average by drinking milk or water, or hot milk or hot water, or hot water and hot milk. There's nothing nice or better, however, than a glass of pure, cool water, not iced water. Many persons look forward to the approach of winter with dread and fear of sickness. They expect a return of my usual winter cold, my usual sore throat, my old neuralgia, my rheumatism, or an attack of la gripe, and for their children they see nothing ahead but scarlet fever, diphtheria, sore throats, etc. Now these fears in themselves are sufficient to produce their usual complaints, owing to the way such misguided people wrap themselves up and stay in the house in an effort to stave off the complaints, and in so doing, the life essentials are neglected. And such care is taken of the poor children that they also are denied in the life essentials. Cause of disease. One would think that sore throats, neuralgia, colds, etc., were things that lurked in dark places in the summer and blossomed forth in the winter like a plant in springtime. Whereas they are troubles which develop within the human being himself when he shuts himself up during the winter and neglects the life essentials. Keep a healthy child shut up for several days in a warm room in winter, and he becomes fretful and peevish, if not actually sick. He loses his appetite and will seldom ask for a drink of water. But send him out into the cold, fresh air to romp, even with the thermometer below zero, and he will return with cheeks aglow, a voracious appetite, and nearly always thirsty, his romp in the fresh air having created an appetite for the life essentials. Now, what is true of children is true also of grown people. And if they would walk more or romp more in the cold air of winter, there would be a natural desire created for the life essentials in proper proportions. And if healthy persons require the life essentials to keep them well, what chance is there for a sickly person to get well unless he gets the life essentials like a healthy person? He may not be able to romp very much at first, but he must have his full share of oxygen and liquids. But the foolish fears of winter and its rigors do still more harm, for they tend to put the whole organism, mind and body, into a cowering, shrinking, weakened state, and so invite the very things one would avoid. The mind plays such an important part in health and sickness that one's mental equipment and fortifications must be properly looked after if he would resist disease. Meet the very thought of winter, ice, snow, swirling wind, coal bill, and everything with the strongest assertion of your ability not only to survive it all, but to enjoy it all, and proceed positively and independently to carry out your assertions. Use some such auto-suggestions as the following, going over them many times a day until they are second nature to you, and live up to them fearlessly. Let them become habits of thought. Winter auto-suggestions. Winter's now here, and I see healthy people around me every day. Health is mine by birthright, and by living like a healthy person, I am bound to be healthy. The healthy man helps himself freely to fresh air every day, so hereafter I shall ventilate my bedroom and keep fresh air in all the living rooms in my house. I shall spend as much time as possible in the open air every day, no matter how cold the weather, and I shall breathe the fresh air deeply into my lungs till it seems to stimulate me all over. I shall know each night as I go to bed that I have helped myself to all the fresh air I require. I am taking the full amount of liquids required by the healthy man during the winter, 2 quarts every day. I know this liquid is sustaining all my secretions and enabling me to eliminate the waste materials from my body. It is making me enjoy my food and enabling me to digest it thoroughly. It is keeping my kidneys, skin, and bowels active. It is bound to keep me in good health. The fresh air I am getting now and the liquids I am drinking stimulate my appetite. I enjoy every meal. I am eating heartily, and I thoroughly masticate every mouthful of food before swallowing it. I can feel that the food I eat is making good, red, rich blood. It is giving me warmth, strength, courage, and health. I know that by looking after these 3 life essentials faithfully, I am bound to have perfect health, and that health ensures me against disease. I am a healthy man. I am fearless. I go fearlessly into all kinds of weather, knowing that health protects me against everything. I am happy, cheerful, confident in my health thoughts. I enjoy the winter and shall enjoy the summer all the more for having passed through the bracing winter months. I know the rules for health. I am following them faithfully. I have health. I am healthy and strong. End of chapter. Chapter 13. Autosuggestion, the diagnosis and treatment of a typical case of chronic physical suffering. In order that every reader may thoroughly understand the important point I brought out in Chapter 2, that the majority of physical troubles from which people suffer are due to faulty circulation, I will give the history and diagnosis of an actual case that attended one of my clinics and outline the advice given to him. Faulty circulation is always due to failure to partake properly of life essentials, whether they be neglected from ignorance or on account of the intervention of certain states of mind which interfere with the normal appetite for the life essentials. Although the patient whose case I cite merely failed to partake freely of the life essentials, he suffered from a great variety of symptoms. In running over the list of his symptoms, they appear at first glance to be entirely distinct and independent troubles. But a little closer examination will show that all physical symptoms are invariably interdependent and spring in sequence from a common cause: faulty circulation. This being the case, it is evident that no matter from what physical trouble a man suffers, he cannot go wrong in employing autosuggestions that will pave the way for the life essentials, and when proper attention is given to the life essentials and the circulation improves, the symptoms in turn disappear in a sequence. The man, whose case I report herewith, was completely relieved of all his symptoms in a few weeks and gained 14 pounds in weight. This result was brought about solely by his following the instruction given regarding the life essentials and persistently employing the autosuggestions advised. There are thousands of chronic sufferers who require nothing more to regain their health than the simple advice given in this chapter, provided, of course, it be followed out faithfully. Try it. Here's the history and diagnosis of the case and the advice given, reprinted from Lesson 11 of my larger work on the suggestive therapeutics. In order that the student may be familiar with the system we use in arriving at an accurate diagnosis of cases treated at the Chicago School of Psychology, I select a case in point, giving the detailed methods employed in an exhaustive manner. This will be a sufficient guide in similar cases. We have taken hundreds such, and cured them without the use of a single drop of medicine. It is always possible to foretell the result which will be obtained in these cases, provided the patient follows out his part of the treatment. Suffered 35 years. The patient, MC, male, unmarried, age 57, weight 156 pounds, presented himself at the clinic one morning, and when asked of what he was complaining, said, "I have been suffering for 35 years from constipation. I have tried everything I could think of which seemed likely to benefit me. I have consulted a dozen physicians and taken their medicines, which always left me in a worse condition, although they moved my bowels while taking them. I haven't had one normal movement of the bowels in 35 years. For the past 2 years, I have taken nothing internally, relying on enemas. I believe if my constipation could be cured, I should feel better all over. The doctors have always said that the constipation was the cause of my poor health. I came here because you cured a friend of mine, but my trouble is of such long standing that I don't believe anything will ever cure me." At this juncture, I asked the patient to leave the room and addressed my class as follows. "You have all heard what this man has said, and I wish to point out a few things to you. This man believes all his trouble is caused by constipation. Now, constipation is not a cause of anything but hemorrhoids, which follow the unnatural straining at stool which it requires. It is a symptom, generally, of imperfect elimination, but sometimes of a contracted sphincter muscle or some other mechanical obstruction. However, a glance at the sallow complexion of this patient shows that in his case at least, it is likely due to imperfect elimination caused by imperfect nutrition. When nutrition is perfect, every organ is well nourished and performs its function properly. I venture to say that very few, if any, of the organs in this patient's body are working perfectly. I think we shall find that he neither digests nor assimilates his food properly. If this be the case, we should find other troubles in his body resulting from imperfect nutrition. A tree is much like a human being. Give it plenty of fresh air, water, and a rich soil, and it will flourish. In the same degree in which it is deprived of these does it wilt. And the first part of the tree to wilt, when the nutrition becomes imperfect, is the top. This owing to the force of gravity, the blood of the tree, the sap, having to overcome this force of nature when nourishing the highest leaves. The blood of man is also affected by the same force, and the moment a man's circulation begins to run down, owing to stinted nutrition, we find that the first symptoms of trouble appear in the head. We should study these symptoms and be in a position to recognize them at once, for some of them precede such troubles as constipation and dyspepsia. Effect of imperfect nutrition on the brain. The brain failing to receive its accustomed amount of blood, such troubles as impaired memory, inability to concentrate the attention, sleeplessness, nervousness, irritableness, the blues and slight headaches develop, and the impulses sent all over the body becoming feebler, the various organs do not perform their functions as satisfactorily as usual. The impulses to the stomach and bowels becoming weaker and weaker, dyspepsia or constipation, or both, soon follow. As soon as these, the main organs of nutrition, are out of order, nutrition fails rapidly and more head symptoms develop. Every impulse to the muscular system leaves the brain, and the strength of these impulses depends upon the nutrition to the brain centers controlling the various groups. As the nutrition of these centers declines, the whole muscular system, including the muscles of the bowels, becomes weaker, and the patient complains that he exhausts easily. The impulses for elimination becoming weaker, waste products remaining in the circulation, and any of the evils which naturally follow this state of affairs, such as rheumatism, sick headache, biliousness, etc., are likely to develop. The centers of the special senses feeling the lessening of the vital fluid, such troubles as impaired vision, impaired hearing, loss of appetite, sense of taste, and inability to detect odors quickly soon follow. The sense of touch becomes more acute, and it is for this reason that one in poor health becomes hypersensitive. Lowered circulation in the mucous membrane of the throat and nose is often the cause of nasal catarrh, appearing on the scene as an early symptom. This man believes his whole trouble is caused by constipation, but when we have taken a full list of his symptoms, many of you will think differently. I shall now recall the patient. Symptoms. Briefly, the following is the list of symptoms he gave, and I copy them from the record book. Memory, concentration, sight, hearing, strength, digestion, appetite, all impaired. Nasal catarrh, insomnia, hemorrhoids, constipation, biliousness, rapid pulse, vertigo, cold hands and feet, neuralgia, dry skin, rheumatism, inability to think quickly, all present. Amount of urine voided very scanty and high-colored. Eats very little food and drinks on average of 1.5 pints in 24 hours. Had operation for hemorrhoids some years before. but they returned. Cause was not removed. Sleeps not more than 2 or 3 hours each night. Having finished recording the history of the patient's case, I took a seat directly in front of him. He was in a half-reclining position in the operating chair and could see every expression of my face. Looking him squarely in the eyes, I addressed him earnestly as follows. Talk with the patient. Mr. C, you came here hoping you might get well, and I am glad to be able to tell you that after considering carefully your present condition and the history of your case, we are confident that you can be made a sound man again. However, to bring about this result, it will be necessary for you to follow carefully for 1 month the simple directions I shall give you. Now I want you to promise that you will follow my orders faithfully for 1 month and come regularly for treatment. Answer. I promise. Very well. I will not ask you to do anything very laborious. Mr. C, you require more blood. To obtain this, you must eat more food and drink more fluid than in the past. The healthy man requires 5 pints of fluids in the day to enable the various organs of his body to perform their work properly. You must be exact about this point. See that you drink at least 10 ordinary glasses of fluid every day. Take not more than a good mouthful of fluid at one time, and take a dozen or more of them every hour. Every time you sip your fluids, I wish you to remember the conditions we are endeavoring to bring about. Every time you do this, you bring the force of autosuggestion into operation, and this will assist in overcoming your troubles. A man can tell a story so often that finally he may believe it to be true. You must tell yourself about the changes which are to come about so often that they will actually occur. As often as possible, repeat to yourself something like this. This water tastes good. It is intended to make me hungry, increase the amount of gastric juice, assist digestion and assimilation, increase the amount of bile, and cause my bowels to move at 7 o'clock every morning. It is to increase my nutrition, improve elimination, and make me feel better all over. I shall be happier, more cheerful, more energetic, and must sleep soundly each night at 10 o'clock. Suggestion. Mr. C, try to think over these things 50 to 100 times a day. Think only of things as you wish them to occur. Avoid discussing your ill health with friends. In fact, say nothing about your physical condition until you can tell everyone around you that you're feeling better. For the present, cease taking medicines. If necessary to administer anything internally, we can prescribe later. However, I am certain that you will not require 1 drop of medicine, and inside of a day or 2, your bowels will be moving freely. Now, Mr. C, close your eyes and relax every muscle in your body. That's right. You have relaxed nicely all over, and I have your whole attention. Every word I utter now will sink deeply into your mind, and every suggestion of health I give to you will take form in action in your body. Listen, Mr. C. You will be hungry, hungry for every meal. Thirsty all the time. You will sip at your fluids all day long, and 50 to 100 times a day you will think of the condition of health which must come to you. Your stomach will digest everything you eat. Your appetite will increase, and shortly you will be eating and drinking as much as the strongest man you know. When you are eating and drinking as much as a strong man, you will be generating as much strength as he does. In fact, you will become as strong as the strongest men you know. You will practice long, deep breathing. Get plenty of fresh air and practice deep breathing a number of times each day. Your bowels will move freely every morning at 7 o'clock. At 7 o'clock, do you hear? At 7 o'clock every morning. Keep the appointment at that hour, whether the inclination be present or not, at 7 o'clock each morning. Then you will sleep at 10 o'clock every night. Your whole system will undergo a change at once, and you will sleep every night. Commencing tonight at 10 o'clock, you will sleep. Do you hear? Mark the hour at 10 o'clock tonight, at 10 o'clock every night. Stimulation of the brain centers. I kept up suggestions such as these for about 5 minutes, as well as others which applied to his condition, repeating them over and over. I then lowered his head for 2 or 3 minutes, using manipulations around the head and neck. I let the patient understand that this was to stimulate the various brain centers by increasing the amount of blood in his head. Having kept his head down for 2 or 3 minutes, I raised it and once more went over the same suggestions given before. The patient was then allowed to rest in silence for a minute, with directions to think over what had been said to him. He was then aroused and told to come regularly for treatment. Improvement the following day. The following day he reported that his bowels had moved shortly after his treatment the day before, as well as that morning, and that he had a better appetite, but had not slept very well. The next day he reported that he had slept better, eaten better, felt stronger, and that the bowels had moved again. The force of any suggestion depends largely upon the number of times it is repeated. The oftener a piece of poetry is repeated, the more indelibly it becomes imprinted in the mind. It is so also with a therapeutic suggestion. The oftener it is repeated, the more potent it becomes, even though the treatment may seem monotonous. For this reason, this patient was given almost the same suggestions day after day during his whole treatment of 6 weeks. The suggestions evidently became fixed in his mind, for they certainly bore fruit. From day to day the patient gained steadily, one trouble after another disappearing as his nutrition improved. He seemed to follow every suggestion, for at the end of 6 weeks, his weight had increased from 156 to 170 pounds. Absolutely every complaint had disappeared, and the patient declared that he was in better health and in spirits than he had ever enjoyed. As I said before, this was a typical case, and the treatment, though simple, was typical of the plan of treatment I adopt in these cases. End of chapter. Chapter 14. Autosuggestion, the basis of all healing. In the introduction to this book, I said it was demonstrable fact that all the phenomena of Christian Science, magnetic healing, divine science, mental science, sacred shrines, absent treatment, success circles, etc., are due to autosuggestion. Also that the majority of cures made under the direction of practitioners of the recognized schools of medicine can be directly traced to the same cause. Cures of similar complaints have occurred under all these methods of treating disease, yet the thoughtful reader must realize that in a given disease there can be but one method of cure, no matter how many different symptoms of treatment may have claimed to cure that particular disease. All a system of treatment can do is to arouse the healing powers within the patient himself, and since this healing force is identical in every instance, it is evident that some force must be used in common by all these different systems, for cures of similar complaints have been made by all. Although these systems of treatment may differ greatly in their theories and practice, there is one agent that is employed by all in common, and this agent cannot be eliminated or withheld from any system of treatment. I refer, of course, to autosuggestion. The moment a patient begins to take a treatment of any nature or does the smallest thing for the purpose of producing a certain result, his autosuggestion is brought into play. And other things being equal, the system of treatment which arouses the strongest autosuggestion in a given case is the system which is most likely to cure the patient. I am aware that the advocates of the system of treatment I have mentioned ridicule or deny that autosuggestion plays any part in the cures they claim to make, but this merely shows their ignorance of the existence of the power and scope of autosuggestion. The reader who has followed me through the theory and practice of autosuggestion must realize that the practitioner of the healing art, who understands what can be accomplished by autosuggestion and knows how to arouse his patient's autosuggestions, is bound to get better results than a practitioner who is ignorant of the force and who trusts to luck for his system of treatment in some inscrutable way to heal his patient. Recently, I was asked the following curious but significant question by a correspondent. Quote, I know a man who claims to cure diseases and burns by blowing on the parts affected. He claims that any person born after the death of his father has the power to make similar cures. What do you think about it? End quote. I have heard of men who cured by snapping their fingers around their patients' bodies, and of the doctor who prescribed for his patients, made up their medicines, and then took the medicine himself instead of giving them to his patients. Excellent results followed both these methods and treatment, and I have no doubt this latest method of healing will make hundreds, yes, thousands of cures, and command a large following of converts, especially if the blowing doctor's breath be strong. But in what way, pray, does the healing force aroused by the blowing differ from the healing force aroused by Christian Science, magnetic healing, shrines, or any of the other systems I have mentioned? Since the world began, thousands of cures, some more absurd than others, have come into prominence, had their following, made their cures, and then died out, only to be followed by others apparently more reasonable, but just as absurd in fact. Those which come in the guise of a religion secure the most adherents and are slowest to die out. But as the education of the masses spreads in matters of psychic, even the greatest of religious systems of treatment will go the same way as the posthumous healer's breath. I cannot see that the cure of one case of rheumatism by a posthumous healer's breath differs from the cure made in another case by carrying a horse chestnut in the pocket or wearing a brass finger ring. Nor can I see that it differs from a cure of rheumatism made by any other method or system or theory of treatment. The healing force aroused by all must be identical in every case, and since autosuggestion is the one force or agent ever present in all systems of treatment, I feel safe in assuming that autosuggestion is the healing force underlying all systems of treatment, and that the cures are made by the arousing of the healing forces within the patient himself through his autosuggestions. If autosuggestion in so many absurd disguises can work such marvels in healing the sick, strengthening the weak, bringing success to the unsuccessful by wearing Hindu charms, bringing hope to the hopeless, etc., who can say what cannot be accomplished by its undisguised, intelligent use? End of chapter. Chapter 15. How Psychic Pictures Are Made Realities by Autosuggestion. What are your mental or psychic pictures like? Have you ever given a thought to the fact that you are continually influenced for good or for bad by your mental pictures? No? Then I would advise you hereafter to pay some attention to the mental pictures you conjure in your mind every day of your life. For they play an important part in your life and in your destiny, and can be made to play a still more important part and enable you to shape your destiny if you will learn to control them voluntarily. Have you never seen a psychic picture of yourself playing a weak, impotent, fearful part with everything going against you? And have you noticed when you have persisted in drawing up these fear thought pictures that everything seemed to go wrong with you, that they depressed you, and that the very fears of your mental pictures seemed to materialize? Remember this. Thought tends to take form in action, and mental pictures tend to materialize. I suppose this is only another way of saying, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. It is true also that our thoughts or mental pictures, besides influencing ourselves mentally and physically, actually affect the people around us, and at times apparently influence even inanimate objects. So subtly does the mind work in its endeavor to make our thoughts realities. Of course, I do not mean by this that the mind is actually projected from the body for the purpose of removing material obstacles, but so great is the power of the mind, when it is earnestly riveted on a desired goal, that our every voluntary or involuntary action is influenced by it, and at times, in the concentration upon the goal, many acts are unconsciously performed, which, as I said, make it appear superficially as if the mind influences even material objects. Frequently I am called upon to treat persons suffering from nothing but the effects of persistently holding wrong mental pictures. Some of these patients have held mental pictures of themselves in which they were afraid to meet people and could feel their own embarrassment as depicted in these mental pictures. The result of habitually holding a mental picture of this kind is self-consciousness. Undesirable psychic images. Others have held pictures in which they have seen themselves on the road to insanity, and the insane asylum yawning for them at the end of the road. And although it is true that a man who is actually going insane never realizes his trouble, yet the victims of these mental pictures of insanity may eventually become insane if the mental pictures are persisted in. But the insanity in these cases arises from the poor physical condition into which the patient falls as a result of fear and worry. Fear and worry interfere with normal desires for the life essentials, air, water, and food, and their neglect causes general physical deterioration in which the brain shares. Others again have held mental pictures of failure and poverty, with the poorhouse well defined in the background. Psychic pictures of this kind produce fear, worry, and unhappiness, and these lead to general physical deterioration. With the loss of health comes loss of ambition, leading to failure, and not infrequently to the actual materializing of the mental picture. Poor physical health, following the neglect of the life essentials, is the most frequent cause of injurious psychic impressions. But it is also true that thought forms of sickness and disease will induce poor physical health. Consequently, in banishing injurious or undesirable mental states, it is important in every instance to improve the general physical condition at the earliest possible moment. For with good health, it is much easier to hold the mind on beneficial mental images than when the body and brain are suffering from physical deterioration. It is impossible to hold a mental picture of health at the same moment with a picture of disease, or to hold a picture of confidence and fearlessness with a picture of self-consciousness and timidity. And, since it is a fact that mental pictures do materialize, it is not difficult to select the classes of mental pictures one should encourage his mind to hold. The mental pictures of the average man drift into his mind unconsciously, and if they be injurious, they may injure him greatly before he realizes the actual cause of his troubles and learn how to remove it. Every man should be taught how great an influence his mental pictures exert over his mental and physical welfare and his fortunes, and he should learn that it is possible for him to choose voluntarily his mental pictures. Choice of mental images. The voluntary selecting of mental pictures is not an easy feat at first for a person whose mental images have been allowed to run riot, or for one who endeavors to hold a mental picture directly opposed to a conception that has been held in his mind habitually. However, a little practice in holding voluntarily created mental imagery assists greatly. And if the practice be persisted in daily, it will not take long to establish a fair degree of voluntary control over the subjective thought forms. To the man in poor health, I would suggest that he first give careful attention to the life essentials and then hold mental pictures of health. He must call up a picture in which he sees himself in good health in every organ and every cell of his body. He should see himself strong and vigorous. The timid and self-conscious should see themselves playing the part of strong, determined, aggressive, confident, fearless men. The man with fears and worries should picture himself fearless, light-hearted, and happy. The man who feels himself unjustly oppressed or downtrodden or overburdened should see himself absolutely freed from his objectionable environment, a veritable monarch of all he surveys. The unsuccessful or the unfortunate should let his mind dwell on pictures of successful attainment, while a man with an ambition should see himself attaining his ambition. Rule for producing desirable psychic states. The simplest rule to follow in conjuring mental forms that will prove most serviceable in a given case is to picture voluntarily in one's mind the exact conditions it is desired to bring about. To secure the results desired, it is not sufficient merely to draw up an occasional mental picture of attainment. On the contrary, the mental picture should be formed hundreds of times every day, if only for a moment at a time, until a habit of calling up the desired condition is formed. It is a little more difficult if the new picture happens to be directly opposed to an old picture, but the new picture must be called to mind so often that there is no time left for the mind to dwell on the old scenes, and as often as the old impression manages to slip into the mind, it must be supplanted immediately with the new picture, and eventually the old thought picture will fade away. Autosuggestion helpful. The materializing of any reasonable mental picture can be hastened by accompanying the picture with earnest verbal autosuggestion. The idea of mental pictures materializing may seem absurd to some and impractical to others, but I have seen too many positive results follow the voluntary use of the mental pictures to question their efficacy as a means of attaining desired ends of almost every nature. End of chapter. And also, this is the end of the reading of autosuggestion, what it is, and how to use it for health, happiness, and success by Herbert A. Parkyn. Please do, if you haven't done so yet, hit that like button. If you know of someone, a family or friend that could benefit from anything in this book, please share it with them and consider subscribing to the channel. Be blessed.